Hello, everybody. This is Arnold. This is the Cherry Hill Seminary podcast. Cherry Hill Seminary serves pagan and nature-based communities by providing high-quality education, allowing students to succeed academically and lead spiritually. The guest on the show today is Reverend Mela Borawski. Mela, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself to the audience? We're going to be talking about your work in community building, the interfaith community, and just kind of life in general. But tell us a little bit about who you are and where you come from.
Sure. I live in South Carolina. I've been here for most of my life. I'm in my 50s, and I've been pagan for about 23 years. The last 10, I've been in community service as a pagan. And at some point in my life, in my 40s, I went back to school. I became an ordained pagan minister, and I'm now building a pagan community, a pagan church here called a Greenwild Spiritual Fellowship. And I also am a hypnosis practitioner, and I live in a homestead. I have goats and chickens and all kinds of things like that. I love all types of nature, growing things, herbalism, books, and being in community and helping people grow.
I love it. Thank you again so much for being here, Mela. I understand that you're a former student of Cherry Hill. Can you tell us a little bit about the course that you took and your experience with that?
Yeah, last year I took a class called Slow Stitching as a Spiritual Practice, and it was just a really an incredible class to learn basically how to weave your spells and your intentions with stitchery with a needle and thread. And it was a very mindful, almost meditative practice that we learned, and I have continued to use that to this day.
Yeah, that's great. I had seen that class when it was offered, and I thought it was fascinating, fascinating idea. Um, and also just goes to show one, I wanted to show the audience the variety of courses that they can take through Cherry Hill, but also that you can just take one course at a time. You don't have to dedicate yourself to a full program
Mm.
if you just want to study. Okay, and so now let's talk about your work in the community. You had mentioned you were involved, or you have been involved with the interfaith community for about 10 years, right?
Um, not not the interfaith community here in South Carolina. I have been involved in being a leader in the pagan community for about 10 years now. I've only been in doing interfaith work for maybe the last four or so.
So let's talk about then your community service work. How did that get started, and what are some of the major accomplishments you're proud of?
As I was growing up, I grew up in a Christian church, and service to the community was very important then. In fact, I did the whole gamut of missionary overseas, including going overseas, and just community service, volunteerism was very important to me, even before I started on a different path. But I kind of got lost along the way. So, about 10 years ago, I got to the point in my healing and in my life where I wanted to be with other people. I didn't want to be solitary anymore. And so when I started looking for other people like me here in South Carolina, I couldn't find anybody. I know that there were people, but they weren't advertising it. So I couldn't find them. So I decided to start a meetup. That was the first thing I ever did, was just a meetup. And I had some people come over to my house, and it grew from there. And I realized that the training that I'd gotten through my life, even as a missionary, I'd gone to Bible college, I'd gone to a lot of different things. I taught in a lot of different churches. I was a children's pastor, so I had experience, but it wasn't in the pagan community. It was just in the religious community. But I said, you know what? There's a lot of things from that time that I love and that I miss and that I felt like we needed. So I began to build it. And so the first thing that I did besides the meetup after I'd gone back to school because I felt like I needed just a little more education, a little more guidance. I wanted to be an integrative healing arts practitioner. I wanted to learn about hypnosis and I wanted to be an actual ordained minister. I started doing full moon circles about 2019, I think is when I started that. And we started doing them at the place where I was doing hypnosis. And it grew from there. And I have had anywhere from 5 people to 60 or 70 who would come out to that. And we still do those to this day. We just do them under Greenwild now. So that was one of the first things. And I'm really proud to be able to say that very rarely have I ever even not done those, even through health journeys, even through the pandemic we were able to continue to do those full moons, except for just a couple of times when we missed that.
What do you think is the value of building community the way you've described, kind of pulling everybody together and working together? What is the value of that, you think, for the pagan community especially?
I think that what I've seen is that a lot of people are like me, and they grew up in various religions or groups or communities where they had, the potlucks. We kind of laugh about potlucks, but there was community there. I remember growing up and I went to the people's homes who had farms and I helped to bring in crops and we got together for all the big events throughout the year and it was more of a family. And a lot of times we don't have that in the pagan community the way that we had it. We don't want the dogma. We don't want a lot of I mean, there was abuse, different things like that from those times, but we do want a family like that or a community like that. So I think that, especially in the pagan community, having ethical people who are trained, who are able to make a safe and inclusive. Inclusivity is extremely important to me and to Greenwild. To have that space where we can get together. Like tonight. Tonight, I have a few people coming over. Somebody reached out and said, I need a healing circle. And if you don't have a community, who are you going to call for that? So they're going to come over and we'll do a healing circle. So I think that we as people have this little thing inside of us that's craving that, even if we're solitary. And it's like in Holli's book where she talks about the constellated ministry. So pagans are very much about going to a certain metaphysical bookstore for one thing, or they have something online and they go here for this and here for that. You have to realize that and build a community for them that doesn't tell them, hey, you have to get everything you need right here because they're not going to do that. So having the knowledge and the training and the education to build something to meet those needs, but not having the things that were harmful there is just going to give people something that they are desperately seeking, especially in the world right now.
And so you've mentioned a couple times your current project, Greenwild. Can you tell us a little about that and what the intention behind that project is?
Greenwild is a dream, I had a kernel of a dream a long time ago that when I started building that full moon, and the full moon, when I first started doing it, it was an interfaith full moon. Anybody could come to that. It didn't matter who you were, as long as you were respectful. But I had this dream of building a true pagan community. It wasn't a secret coven. I have nothing against secret covens or anything like that, but I wanted to build it with all the good things that church had and not the bad things, not the things that were harmful. And so it was a little kernel of a dream. And a couple years ago, in fact, our 2 year anniversary is coming up in November. We got a board together and we got recognized as an actual church here in South Carolina. It's our goal to, at some point, be recognized nationally as a nonprofit, but we are an actual church here in South Carolina as of 2 years ago. And it's a group where we offer the full moons. We offer virtual classes. We have an online kind of a magical witchy academy. We do camps, and I just got back from a retreat that was about healing. We do a shadow work, a free community shadow work. We have a holistic clinic that we do. Most of the times free. If it's not free, it's under $20. It's a very low cost holistic healing clinic that we do as a ministry. And we're just trying to build something right now on the property where I live, where people can come together and have a safe and inclusive space. We're trying to change our language to be absolutely inclusive to everyone. And because even in paganism, even in the pagan traditions, even the language is sometimes not as inclusive as we want it to be. So we're just shifting some things and building our own space like that. And our goal is to one day have quite a bit of acreage where we can just have a space that's just for Greenwild, and even like Circle Sanctuary has a green cemetery. That's our goal as well, is to have a green cemetery. So we have a lot of big goals that started with just a little kernel.
And does your church have a website or social media link you can share?
Yeah, we have a website. It's greenwildfellowship.org, and we have a Discord. I don't know right offhand what the Discord link is, but you can look up Greenwild Spiritual Fellowship, or you can email me. I'm considered their hearth keeper. You can email me at greenwildfellowship@gmail.com, and I can give you the link to the Discord. We're on Facebook as well, but we're kind of shifting more into Discord.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Yeah, if anybody's interested, check out the website. And so currently you had mentioned before we started the interview that you do identify as a witch. What is your I should say, what how would you describe the current spiritual path you're on?
I would consider my witchcraft path a green witch, um, a combination of a green witch and a hedge witch, which I think that hedge witchery is very much like what some people call a more shamanistic path, and Greenwild is kind of being built around that. So we're pantheistic, very focused on nature, herbalism, and we do journey work. We cross the hedge and do a lot of work in the Greenwild, as we call it. But that's my focus mainly, and so it's kind of just bleeds into the group that I'm forming.
Would you mind talking a little more about that? I've never dived deep into green witchcraft or hedge witchcraft. How would you describe the system? I guess what should people expect if they're unfamiliar and they come to Greenwild?
I started out when the very first time that I started even looking at paganism, I went on the Druid path, which is very nature centered, and that didn't end up being exactly where I wanted to stay, but it does color a lot of my beliefs and who I am, and so when you kind of pull out the green witchcraft, we have affirmations. We have 13 affirmations, and a lot of those concentrate on having a right relationship with nature. So the green witch part of it, which you don't even have to be a witch. Oh, I think witch is a job that you do, and you can be a Christian witch or an atheist witch or anything like that. I just happen to be a pagan witch. But those beliefs pull into that as very much focused on being in nature, having a right relationship with nature, with the spirits of the land wherever you are. It also We also have a lot of herbalism that goes on. Homesteading, we do resistance homesteading classes. So that green is really that nature part of it that is very key to us. And then the hedge witchcraft part of it, if you think of the hedge as that liminal space between the known world, the physical world, and the spirit world, that's where it's kind of like shamanism, because you cross that liminal space in meditation, You can do hypnosis. It could be called journey work through drumming, through all these different means. And you cross into the spirit world, which we just happen to term the Greenwild. And you can do a lot of spiritual work there. You can go into the different spaces and talk to ancestors. You can look for animals to give you some wisdom. And so that's a key part of us is not everything that we do is in the physical space. A lot of the work we do, and I train the people who we have initiates as well who are learning even deeper how to be part of this Greenwild tradition. And we do journey work where we go and just practice being able to get into that deep trance-like meditative state to go and do the work on the other side of the hedge. And that's where the whole term hedge witch, as far as I understand it, comes from, is that's the boundary between those two worlds. And so when you are a hedge witch, you cross that hedge a lot and do a lot of work. Another one of the things that I do, I get called for in the area, all around South Carolina mainly, is to go and clear houses to deal with depossessions of people, of places, and that too is working on the other side of the hedge. And that just for whatever reason has turned out to be one of the things that people call me to do a lot.
Very interesting. How long is that initiate process for the tradition?
It's about 3 years. It's a year and a day each level, and there are 3 levels.
And tell me again, how long have you been working in hypnosis?
I graduated in 2018, so since
Oh,
right before the pandemic. I went back to school in my 40s, which is, I know not everybody does that, but I had to heal a lot in my life, and then I wanted to be able to give back to people.
have you found the connection between your paganism or witchcraft and hypnosis to be? Do you find the hypnosis allows you a more secular entryway to help people?
I definitely have a lot of clients who are all manner of people. I've always been more interfaith minded, even when I was in a very closed-minded church. I didn't understand why we couldn't like everybody, why we couldn't be around everybody. But I do think that hypnosis allows me to not always have my pagan minister or witch hat on, but still be able to delve into things that people don't understand that to some people might look like magic when really you are rewiring your subconscious. So, yeah, as a hypnosis practitioner, I'm helping people quit smoking, I'm helping them with stress and anxiety, but I'm also doing some energy work if they consent to that while they're doing it. I do a lot of past life regressions. We can go and use that for the hedge work that we're doing and help the hypnosis be an even deeper trance because I've been trained in using my language and I have a hypno voice that I use that I was trained in that just naturally allows the subconscious to come forward. And so I can use that. So in the work that we're doing spiritually, to go meet a spirit guide or to go find an ancestor or anything like that. So it definitely bleeds into both sides and has been an absolute asset to everything that I do in my life.
That's interesting. And for someone who's never given it a shot, um, what what might you say to them to try and open their mind or to put them at ease, or perhaps even something they can do on their own at home to kind of introduce them slowly to the idea?
A lot of people are afraid of it because they think that they're going to lose control. They've seen stage hypnosis, and when you're doing therapeutic hypnosis, it's not like stage hypnosis at all. You are always in control, even if you are doing the deeper work like past life regressions or age regression. And so I always tell people to think about any kind of time where you just kind of felt like you went somewhere real quick. Maybe you were driving and you don't remember how you got to one spot or the other. And a lot of people have that experience. What they don't realize is that's actually self-hypnosis, that the movement of the car and just driving, you've actually been in a hypnotic state. and you just didn't know it. So a lot of people are susceptible. Some people are extremely susceptible, but it doesn't matter because it's just like a meditation. You are in control at all times. And if you have an ethical hypnosis practitioner, they're not going to put anything in your mind that you haven't talked about. I go over the different lines that I say because we will put certain things, like if somebody wants to quit smoking, I will ask them very specifically, what do you want me to say and in what language? Like, how do you say this to yourself to encourage you that you're not going to smoke anymore? And so I will use that actual language. So it's really you speaking to yourself. I'm just using tools to do that. If you wanted to do it yourself, there's so many things on YouTube and other things online that can just be meditation at first. And if you're comfortable with that, and if you are have a rapport with whoever you're going to do hypnosis with, which is super important, I would say try it at least once because it is one of the fastest ways to rewire things in your brain, to rewire that subconscious for anything. You can do hypnosis for literally anything.
And can you tell me a bit about your work with past life regression?
Yeah, sure. That's one of the more exciting things that I really I've loved to do. I started doing that a little bit while I was still in school because we had to have a lot of free clients, as they do, just to test out and record, and the teachers would go over that. And so I started delving into past life regression very early on, and it's been just an incredible thing to have people just go on these journeys and for us after it's over to look up names and places and actually have them pull up to be real things and real people in places that these people did not know of before. Now, you can't always do that, but sometimes we have. One of the things I tell people about past life regression is that it's a healing modality. You do not have to believe in reincarnation or past lives in order to get healing from a past life regression. Do we have time for me to tell you a little story about one of my clients?
Yes, please.
Okay. I tell this story quite a bit because it was just so amazing. But I had a client pretty early on, an older lady who had back problems her whole life. And she had gone to every kind of medical thing she could to get relief from these back pains that she had. Nothing helped. And so she decided that she was going to try hypnosis. And she came to me and we did a past life regression just to see if there was any kind of energy she was holding on to from a past life. Now, my past life regressions are different uh, from regular hypnosis sessions because in a regular hypnosis session, all you have to do is listen. In past life regressions, they're longer and you have to talk to me. And so I pulled her into this state, and we have this thing where we go down a hallway full of mirrors. It's just the way that I do it. And one of the mirrors call to you, you step through, and you are going into a different time. You can look around, see what you look like, that sort of thing. So she ended up going into this past life where she was a member of a family in a European country, and there was a coup going on of some sort. Her family had been captured, they were nobles of some sort, and they were being killed. And she was being led down this tower, down the stairs in a tower to go out to the courtyard to be shot and killed. And she jumped out of a window as she passed it and landed and hurt her back, broke her back, and died actually with this. Was traumatic. But when her eyes opened after I brought her back to the here and now, she was absolutely amazed, and the pain in her back was gone. She said she understood that she had carried that into this life. And so a whole lifetime of having this unknown pain was just disappeared through having that one past life regression, which was pretty incredible.
Yeah, that is an incredible story. Thank you for sharing that. And so With I saw on your one sheet you also do shadow work.
Yes.
Can you explain a little of what that is, and then the difference between shadow work and past life regression, or why you might recommend one over another?
So, shadow work is something that is important not just to me and that I've been doing for a while. It's important to Greenwild as well. That's why we have a shadow work community group, which meets virtual every other month, that is free to the community. But shadow work, I believe, is the deepest kind of healing that you can do. Carl Jung talks about how we tuck things from our entire lives deep into our psyche, our kind of the basement of our soul. All these things that people say to us, do to us, are traumas. But he actually says that 90% of all those shadows we tuck away are gold, which means that we can use them for good. But if we don't dig them up and actually face them, you can't use them for good. So that's what the work part of shadow work is. It can be therapy. It can be journal prompts. It can be just doing the hard work of looking at something that happened in your life and figuring out, okay, what's the story that I wrote about that and what are the actual facts of that? I had a really hard life. I had a lot of abuse. I had a lot of trauma. And I truly consider, even though it wasn't called shadow work, that all the therapy, including dialectical behavior therapy or DBT, that I went through, that was my first step into shadow work. Because I still use a lot of those DBT techniques in the shadow work that I will facilitate and teach. And I think that past life regression can definitely be a part of shadow work. But shadow work is a huge encompassing thing that you can do a lot of different ways. And past life regression could show you something that maybe it didn't come from this life, maybe it came from another life, that when it gets pulled up, that you can look at it and you can decide what to do with that. I always teach that there's three things you can do when you pull a shadow up. You can say, oh, you know what? That is just who I am, and I'm going to accept that. Or you can say, I don't like the job that this has been doing. Let's say anger. You pull up that you've been a very angry person, and there are things that happened in your life that made you angry, but you don't want to be an angry person like that. So you're saying, I'm going to give you a new job. I'm going to transmute this, and we're going to use this for protesting injustice or joining a sports team or something like that, joining roller derby. I don't know, whatever you want to put that towards. Or you can say, this is not good for my life or those around me. I'm releasing that. And those are the three things you can do with any shadow you pull up. And I think that it is extremely transformative. And in fact, the retreat that I just did this weekend was all about shadow work. And we created this burn book the whole weekend of people writing all these shadows, all these things. I taught different classes and helped them come up with things about the mind, their soul, their life purpose, all these things. And then we burned it in a big bonfire at the end. And that was some really deep shadow work. I'm very proud of the people who were involved in that. Just throwing that out there, I'm really proud of the work that they did.
Do you think someone has to have experienced trauma to get benefit from the practices that you help people with, the past life regression and the shadow work, any of the spiritual alchemy practices?
So my belief is that everybody has some type of trauma. You cannot be a human and live in the world we live in without some type of trauma. It just may not look like everybody else's trauma. So I think that there's some people dig and they have some really, really uh, difficult things that not everybody had to deal with, but trauma is trauma. And so whether we don't judge people's trauma as far as how bad it was or how or anything like that. So if you had a bully in school or you look at a magazine and you don't look like the people on the magazine and that traumatizes you in a way because no matter what you do, you can't get yourself to look like that person on the magazine. Those are all things that you can use in shadow work. If you have been taught that money is the root of all evil, that's going to warp your sense of how you feel about money throughout your life. And that's something that you can deal with in shadow work.
I also think it's important that the audience understand a bit about your own, for those who have experienced what they might consider serious trauma, but your own experiences and your own transformation story. Would you like to talk a little about that?
I could definitely do that if you are interested in that. And I know I get on a roll and I start talking, so please interrupt me if I talk too much.
No, that's fine. We love it.
So my when I mentioned about my church that I grew up in, and it kind of a lot of it stems from that, is it wasn't just your regular, Southern Baptist church. It was an evangelical fundamentalist church that was more like a cult. There was a lot of abuse going on in there. And in the abuse, and there's documentaries on TV right now that I look at and say, yep, that was me, because I was definitely trained that women were not worthy. We needed to shut up, sit back, let the men be in control. And it just so happened that the men in my small church, a lot of them were also abusive. The pastor just wanted my dad to beat the sin out of the kids in the church. So it was worthy of a crazy TV movie. It really was. And people don't really understand the extent until they watch one of those documentaries and see the brainwashing and the abuse and everything else that went on there. So my house was very chaotic, and I never knew when I was going to be in trouble. I never knew when I was going to be physically abused or emotionally abused. And and so I grew up with this idea that I was worthless. I was told that I was worthless. I was told that I would never amount to anything and that I was a failure. And that was literally beat into me, that I just never could achieve anything. And and then as I kind of tried to get away from there, I tried to just be the best kind of person that I could. That's why I went overseas as a missionary. And I just wasn't finding what I was looking for. I didn't find that really until I learned to love myself, and that's a whole different thing. That really changed my life. But all that trauma just started compounding, and I ran away from it by marrying a long-haired drummer that I met after I came back from the mission field, and then getting involved in some different churches after that where I still didn't feel like I had a place. I still felt like something was missing. And as that progressed and I started getting more into paganism, the church that my husband was going to still kind of got involved. And at one point, they told him that he needed to let the unbeliever depart, that I was unsafe around my children, that I should not even be allowed to be around the children, that I was demon possessed, all the crazy things that you hear about with these really ultra fundamentalist churches. It was just very traumatic, very scary, the things that they were pouring into people's brains. So we got separated, and the judge would not have me be with my kids unless an adult was with me for that whole separation. The good thing is we did get back together, but throughout those times, I spent two different times in the mental hospital. I was suicidal. I tried several times to just end my life because I was so convinced that this world and my children and my family would be better off without me. I had I had so little regard for who I was, and just totally convinced. My spiritual gifts, I'm clairvoyant. They were off the charts with crazy things because of all the chemical imbalance. And it's really a wonder and a miracle that I am alive today. That's one of the reasons that I push so hard to try to help other people, is because I felt so alone, and the trauma was burying me, literally burying me in spiritual heaviness. While all those things were happening to me, that I had to learn to love myself. That's when I got into DBT. My parents ended up being very integral in helping me get the help that I needed. And that's why it took until my 40s to actually go back to school, because by that time I felt like I had healed so much of my shadows, so much of the trauma in my life. And I really hoped that I could do something to help other people before they got until their 40s or 50s. I wanted to I thought if I do all of this and I can help one person figure out how to find love for themselves, find love for others before they got so old and were drowning in it, that I would have been a success.
Thank you. That is an incredible story you shared. And I believe one thing you help people with is becoming more resilient. In your experience, what does that even mean for the modern person?
One of the things I hear a lot of people say is that it is kind of a bad thing that we have to be resilient. I look at resilience as more power. So I talk a lot about sovereignty, but resilience is that ability to be detached a little bit from the things going on around us so that we are not living in crisis mode all the time. We are flooding our bodies with cortisol and other stress hormones while living in stress and anxiety constantly. And resilience is being able to shut that off by having tools like tapping, EFT. I really believe in that. Breathing, mindfulness, meditation, hypnosis, all these different things, these modalities that help turn off those stress hormones and allow us to actually find happiness, because it doesn't matter what's going on in your life around you. It doesn't matter the drama, the chaos in the greater world or your own personal life. Resilience is being able to walk along in the midst of absolute chaos, see a dandelion growing through the crack in the sidewalk, and have joy in that moment. And a lot of people are just living their life and they cannot find joy in the moment because they're just always existing in crisis mode. So that's the importance of resilience that I see. It does, it would be a greater world if we didn't have to be resilient, but that's not the world we live in. And I don't know if it will ever be the world we live in. So why not find some way to become our own powerful entities, to just to realize what we have control over and what we don't. That's the sovereignty portion. We only have control over how we act and how we react. That is all. We cannot make other people do, think, or say what we want them to do, but we can choose how we react and how we act. And that is part of resilience as well, is knowing whose story is being written. Am I writing my story or am I caught up in somebody else's story? If that makes sense.
No, that makes perfect sense, and that's a beautiful way to put it. Um, yeah, you had mentioned the personal sovereignty, and as you also help people with learning to set boundaries, which I think probably goes hand in hand with um, resilience. But what does that look like then? And also, I'd like to ask you, how could a pagan integrate these ideas into their spiritual practice? Is there room for that, for practicing resiliency and setting boundaries and personal sovereignty in paganism?
Okay. So first, setting boundaries is extremely important in your sovereignty. Extremely important in your resilience, because if you're not setting boundaries, and the greatest boundary of all is saying no, if you're not doing that in your life, that is you getting caught up in all the drama, chaos, and pain around you. So what you can control a lot of times is not picking up the phone when that toxic person calls you and not actually having to sit there and listen to it. There is nothing that says you have to pick up that phone at that given time if that's not a good time for you to do that. That's just one example of a boundary that people just think that they are required to do that. And it doesn't matter if it's family or not. Say no, set boundaries. If someone asks you to go out and you are exhausted, it doesn't matter if they take it badly. That's on them. You can't control that, but you can say no, and you can set a boundary and say, I don't go out on Mondays because my weekends are very busy or something like that. As far as pagans taking these things into their lives, I think it's very important and definitely ways to do that. One of the ways that you can kind of incorporate your paganism with these types of resilience and even the shadow work, the sovereignty, there are a lot of goddesses, gods, divine entities that are all about sovereignty, like the Morrigan, for example. She is a sovereignty goddess. So incorporate or look up in whatever pantheon that you are a part of some divine being or entity that is about setting boundaries and saying no. And maybe build them a little altar. And if you're struggling with that, go to that altar and have a little bit of communion and ask for that divine entity, that being to help you channel what it is that they stand for. I think that as pagans, the world is changing, but we're still going to face a lot of people that just think that we are ridiculous on the lower part of it and satanic and should be annihilated on the other end of it and everything in between. So, resilience is important in us being able to speak up and be true and authentic to who we are. So, the more that we learn how to be resilient in our own lives, how to say no, how to not burn ourselves out, how to not give ourselves too much to even a pagan church, being able to take care of ourselves. I don't think that it matters what religion, what spiritual path you are on, or not having one at all, or who you worship or who you honor. These things are integral to every single person, no matter what path they're on. So it's absolutely just as important for a pagan to do that. For the shadow work, look into the story of Persephone. Her story is coming to be very pertinent at this time of year, and it's very interesting. In fact, we call Persephone is our patron for our shadow work group, and we call it Descent into the Darkness. The dark doesn't have to be scary, and life is, I think, just as bad if you have toxic positivity when you have all the negative and drama, because you have to have a balance in all things, and we can't pretend that negativity and pain and drama and chaos doesn't exist, just as much as we can't live and wallow in that either.
Thank you. Um, that's all wonderful information. You had mentioned, as far as setting boundaries, one thing I've noticed is that sometimes people, it's kind of a balancing act because we we want to be part of community, um, and so we want to present ourselves as helpful and available. But then sometimes people will become burned out because they feel as if they're not setting boundaries, and everything gets kind of put on them. So it seems like a delicate balancing act with wanting to be in community, but then also wanting to do it your way.
Right. A lot of the churches that I was involved in, they say give till it hurts. I don't believe in that. Don't give to your till it hurts. Don't bend over backwards and give up who you are. If everyone did just a little bit, nobody would get burned out. So
Right.
that's what I'm teaching my people hopefully to do. They don't come in like that, but I encourage and try to curate ways for everybody to give a hand so that I'm not the only person doing things and my board as well. I say, I don't want to be the only person in charge anymore. That's why we created a board. Now I don't get burned out because I don't have to do everything. So you have to have some leadership to guide with that because our culture, I think, is just, regardless of what church you were in, it's just this idea to give, 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 and not care about yourself. But if you're in right relationship with nature, nature includes you, and you need to be in right relationship with your body, your mind, and your spirit as well. So it's part of your spirituality, actually, to say no and to set boundaries and not to overgive to.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. One aspect of your personal story that I wanted to ask you about, uh, you live with a condition which in layman's terms would be called face blindness.
Yes.
I don't want to attempt to pronounce the word. Can you tell everyone what I'm struggling with?
Yes, it's prosopagnosia, and it is face blindness.
And how does that manifest in your life?
For a long time, as part of me really hating myself, I hid it because how it manifests is I just don't recognize people. I have driven when my kids were young, I've driven right past my children in the car pickup line because they weren't standing at the same pole that they stood at every day. They were at another pole, and I drove right past them, and they came running after the car. I just would, when I would meet somebody, I'd pretend that I know them. I'm in the South, so it's like, hey, hun, hey, darling, that sort of thing. I never had to give the name, and I hid it because I was really ashamed of it. I didn't even know there was a name for it. I just thought something was wrong with me because I never knew who people were. But now I embrace that. I tell people right away. I've gone on many podcasts to talk about it to bring just some clarity to people so they know it's a thing. But I still have trouble, especially having a community. And I go and I teach at festivals. I've taught at Mystic South a couple of times. That's a huge amount of people that have seen me. I will not know who anyone is. And I always ask people that if you see me, please come up and start out with, hey, this is so and so, and I met you at the Greenwild Full Moon, or I met you at Mystic South, or wherever it is, because my face blindness is just to the point where if my husband shaves his beard off and came in the house, I would, I might have a panic attack because I would think a stranger was coming into my house.
That's incredible. Um, Thank you so much for sharing. Uh, Mela, we've almost talked for about an hour.
Mm.
Is is there anything you want to leave the audience with? Any links you would like to share? Perhaps anything going on at Greenwild you might like to publicize? Oh, I did see in your one sheet also. Do you still do the Bell Book and Candle podcast?
I have not done that in a while, but all of the episodes and all the wonderful guests that I had are still up there. And it's Bell with an E if anyone's looking that up. And it's on many different types. You can find it pretty much anywhere.
Okay, so then what other links you got for us?
Greenwild Fellowship.org is the main link if you want to get involved in any of the hypnosis things that I do online, or if you're in the area of Columbia, Midland, South Carolina, you can follow my hypnosis and healing endeavors at 3raysoflight.org, and that's a number three. Besides that, if you have any questions for me or want me to come speak at anything, just you can reach me at greenwildfellowship@gmail.com.
Okay, thank you so much, Mela, for being here. Reverend Mela Borawski was our guest. She shared the links. If you would like to get in touch with her, please do so. I will also put those links in the description of this podcast, wherever you're listening to it. Check the description for all the links that you heard about. Um, Thank you so much for being here. If you found the conversation that we had today to be of value, please consider making a donation to cherryhillseminary.org. If you are interested in any of the programs, certificates, or courses that we have to offer, please visit cherryhillseminary.org/academics. Thank you again, Reverend Mela, for being here. Thank you again, everyone, for listening. I will talk to you all next time. Bye.